Good morning and welcome to Fl33tway's Roundup with your host, of course, me. I know this is crazy. First off, to start everything, I'm not saying good evening or good afternoon because, well, we're doing a morning episode, which is a first, but hey, I'm using natural lighting from the sun that God has blessed everybody here with. And I can't wait to start this episode off because a lot, like I said in my last episode from last night, there's been a lot that's been going on in the NFL space, considering that free agency had started basically Monday, and it's just been going off. It's been going off all week, and I couldn't fit everything in just one episode, so I had to split it up. I had to do one yesterday for the other topics and one for today that's just going to be focusing all on just some of the big name moves that have occurred. Then I'm going to end it off with kind of just sharing some of my biggest winners and losers from this free agency. The losers are going to be people I felt didn't really make a lot of moves to make their team better, and honestly I feel maybe lost more than they gained. And then the winners are going to be people I feel that they did the right moves they needed to do to fix some of their problems from last season, as well as making sure that they just made their team better. So first, of course, we're going to go and start off with the first topic here, and that was, if you remember from last week's episode on Friday, I was talking about one of the Raiders players, Max Crosby. And then later on, I had released a short just a couple minutes after I ended the episode because the news had broke that the Ravens and the Raiders had went and done a trade where Crosby was going to go to Baltimore and be their star edge rusher. Well, then on March 10th, March 10th happens. And on March 10th, we go and get this post from the Raiders where they announced that the Ravens had backed out of their trade for Max Crosby. And as they stated, we will have no further comment at this time. This completely shook the NFL world. No one saw this coming because stuff like this has happened And as they quote unquote worded it, it was because he didn't pass his physical. If you don't know, players when they're going to different teams and transitioning over, they have to go and do a physical test to basically see how they're doing health-wise. And if they're able to pass it, then they can go and move forward with the team. And if they don't pass it, then they don't go and join the team. They could get sent back. They could either stay out of retirement, because it was actually a big thing last year where the Lions, their center Frank Ragnow, he was supposed to be coming out of retirement to play for them and join their offensive line, but then it was announced he didn't pass his physical and he would have to stay in retirement. Apparently his knee was extremely messed up. So for them to use this statement of he didn't pass a physical, something didn't feel right about that. And even when you look at the Raiders, this doesn't really come off as a like, oh, we're understanding of this. People kind of took this as they sound a little salty, like something happened. And when it comes to Max Crosby, this wasn't like it was something unknown. Everybody knew his injury, because we all remember, if you were watching football, you remember towards the last few games of the season, the Raiders wanted Max Crosby to sit out because of his injury. And so this was not unknown information to this. So a lot of people felt like, okay, something's off about that. Something just doesn't feel right. Why would an injury that they were aware of, was it that the injury was more severe than they suspected, or what was going on? And well, a lot of people started to have theories. They started to wonder, okay, did they get cold feet? Did they not want to give up those 2 first-round draft picks they were going to be given for Max Crosby? And even some people were saying watch this, if the Ravens turn around and go for another edge rusher who's a free agent, Trey Hendrickson, then that's going to start setting off a lot of alarms. And, well, literally the morning after the news broke that the Ravens backed out of the trade for Max Crosby, it was then announced that they were signing Trey Hendrickson to a massive, if I'm correct, 4-year, $112 million deal to be their star edge rusher for 4 years. And that caught everybody off guard. And it did not give a good look to the Ravens either, because it didn't give a good look, because you just had an edge rusher in your building, and now you're signing another edge rusher, but you don't have to give up as much as you maybe did originally for Max Crosby with Trey Hendrickson. And so people started to have their theories. Then the reports started coming out. Multiple reports started to be released saying that while Max Crosby was there doing his physical, the Ravens were on the phone with Trey Hendrickson, and it sounds like they were working on a deal. And so I even have my own little theory that I'm going to share about what I feel personally happened, what led to all of this, why Crosby is no longer a Raven, and what resulted in Trey Hendrickson. This is going based off of information that's been publicly shared, stuff that's been rumored. And so my theory is this. I think the Ravens suspected that Trey Hendrickson, someone who was seen as was considered a top 30 free agent available last week, and the Ravens suspected that he would be taken by day 1 or something, and so they wanted to jump on top of the idea of being able to make their defense better, considering their new head coach, Jesse Minter from the Chargers, who was their defensive coordinator, would want to bolster that defense and make it better than it was last season. And so they decided to jump onto that and go and trade for Max Crosby. They wanted that, get a guy like him who everybody knows is at the top of his game, only 29 years, is going to be 29 this year. So they really want to jump in on that now. But, and this, like I said, this is just a theory. I think what started to happen is that as the week went on, Monday passed, now it's Tuesday, Ravens start hearing rumblings. No one has gone for Trey Hendrickson. All we've been hearing is that Trey Hendrickson has been getting the calls. People have been inquiring about him, et cetera, but apparently teams didn't want to go forward with him because his asking price was just a little too high than what they would have expected. And so once the Ravens saw that no one went for Trey Hendrickson, they decided, let's go and call him and start getting some conversations going. And based on reports that while Crosby was there getting his physical, that they were on the phone with Trey Hendrickson, and other reports too, supposedly that Hendrickson had the idea and belief that he would be playing with Max Crosby. I believe that while they were on the phone with Trey Hendrickson, the Ravens were telling him, hey, we want to get a deal done with you to bring you in as our star edge rusher. And also, too, we have Max Crosby here. He's getting his – because, of course, Trey Hendrickson had to be paying attention to the news, so I would believe that he saw that Crosby was getting traded to the Ravens and that he wanted to Hendrickson basically was thinking when he heard that on the phone that, okay, Max is there getting his physical done, the rumors were is that Hendrickson full-blown thought that he was going to be playing with Crosby. He thought it was going to be him and Crosby on that Ravens defense going after the quarterbacks, etc. And I believe that what happened was that, now I can't say what the Ravens might have told him. They might have just simply said, yeah, Crosby is here. He's doing his physical. We want to get you signed to us so then we can have you on this team. And I believe that when they were on the phone, the Ravens got some form of verbal agreement with Hendrickson to become their edge rusher. And once they got that verbal agreement, that's when the wheels started turning. They started thinking to themselves, now that we got Hendrickson, let's back out of this trade with the Raiders so then we don't have to lose those 2 first draft picks, and we could go into the next draft this year and next year and be able to now fix our positions that we have sadly lost in free agency while having Trey Hendrickson. So once they had that audible agreement from Hendrickson that he would be coming over to their team, they just decided to back out, and they got cold feet. Of course, Eric DeCosta, funny enough, a day after, he had a whole press conference and everything where he did talk about the fall through of the trade. He said he was gutted about it. I listened to it. I didn't really believe him. It just didn't really sound genuine. It sounded like just the business side of things. It just was business. And I can't, and on the one hand, I can't blame them because they did what they felt was best for their organization, get those 2 first draft picks back, because 2 first-round draft picks are very important for a team going into the draft, so you can try to go for the best players that are available early. So I can understand that, but to try to act like that they were so heartbroken they couldn't do this trade and everything, I don't believe it. I think they 100% knew what they were doing. They saw they had the chance to get someone for cheaper, and that wouldn't cost as much, and they backed out of that Crosby trade. But through doing that, they kind of helped the Raiders get better, because now the Raiders picked up all these free agents, which we'll be talking about who they picked up later towards the end of the episode. But now the Raiders get to keep Max Crosby, so their defense has now gotten better. They got Crosby. They have a center in Linderbaum, and now they're going to be drafting the number 1 overall quarterback in this year's draft. So the Raiders honestly got better because of the Ravens, but overall the Ravens, they've now put, I feel, a target on their back where I've even seen that there's been reports suggesting that there are teams out there that no longer are going to want to deal with the Ravens. Now, money talks, we all know this, but there's teams saying that they may consider not ever engaging in conversations with the Ravens with possible trades because they saw this firsthand, that the Ravens will back out of a trade if they can find anything better to work for them. It just doesn't make a lot of sense, and we'll be talking about the Ravens definitely later on too in this episode, because I have a few more opinions as far as what they're going to be able to do moving forward, considering everything that has occurred over this week. But now that we've talked about that, we're going to go and talk about another big name move that occurred, and that was with the running back I mentioned from the Seattle Seahawks, the former Super Bowl winner from beating the Patriots, as we all saw. He officially did get picked up in free agency by none other than the Kansas City Chiefs. Yep, that's right. The Chiefs, a team that I was really hoping would stay bad for a little longer. They might have just gotten their premier running back in Kenneth Walker. I still don't understand why the Seahawks would let a guy like Kenneth Walker go, considering how talented he was, and he just won Super Bowl MVP. Why would you let him go into free agency where a team that could be super close to making it back, now they could get a guy like Walker and have a star running back? Now, I have seen there's been Seahawks fans on the internet. They've been saying, oh, no, this isn't as serious people think. This guy is injury prone. He has his moments. But I think that's just the hurt fans talking. I think that's just the hurt fans talking, that they didn't want to lose Walker to free agency, and now they're trying to kind of downplay any of his talent to make it sound like, oh, this isn't as big of a loss as people think it is. It actually helps. It's not going to be that bad. But I think this is going to be a move that ends up working in the favor of the Chiefs. No offense to Isaiah Pacheco, who was the previous running back to the Chiefs. He was okay. He was a solid running back, but it was obvious it's not a good look if your quarterback is your leading rusher on your team. That's not a good look. That means that clearly the running back that you have is not able, because that's what a running back's job is to do, is to help take pressure away from the quarterback. So then if the quarterback is dealing with people coming after him, there's a lot of protection going on to the receivers. They need to be able to hand that ball off to a running back to take that ball, take the pressure, so then the defense has to readjust so they can prepare for the running back, and then the quarterback can go in and start launching the ball out. So with a move like Kenneth Walker going to the Chiefs, I think the Chiefs definitely found a very, very good starting running back that's going to be able to help take that pressure away from Mahomes whenever he comes back from his torn ACL injury. I don't know. I would hope the Chiefs aren't going to be back, especially considering they did lose some defensive players to free agency from a team that we will be discussing in a few minutes here. But you'll have to tell me in the chat or the comments. Do you think the Seahawks made a big mistake letting Walker walk to free agency? We'll have to see as the season starts, but this is a good move for the Chiefs overall. Another big move is we're going to talk about the New Orleans Saints. The Saints, the Aints, whatever you want to call them, the people that are still mad at the Rams for beating them for beating them in that playoff game when it was Drew Brees last season, whatever you want to call them. They got themselves a running back too in Travis Etienne Jr. from the Jaguars. We all saw it, similar to Kenneth Walker. This was another running back I had said I was surprised was going to be hitting free agency. Even though he hasn't shown that like star talent that we are waiting for, he still has shown that he can be a solid running back. And considering that the running back the Saints did last have, Alvin Kamara is getting old. We've seen it even last season if you were watching. He's not able to really do as much as he used to. So you get a guy who's younger. You get a guy that can bring some of that talent and be able to and like I was just explaining, a guy that could take that pressure away from your new star quarterback. We still have to see how Tyler Shuck looks when he starts the season, because anything can happen, but he looked good towards the end of the season for the Saints. So now you just gave Tyler Shuck a premier running back to hand the ball off to. Who knows? I mean, I wouldn't want to just go jump the gun, but the Saints could be back. The Saints could start getting good again if Tyler Shuck ends up being as good as he is. I know I got an uncle out there who's a diehard Saints fan. I know he has to be happy about getting someone like Travis Etienne, but we'll have to see. I think it's a good move, though, even though he hasn't shown as much of the talent that maybe you could say to Kenneth Walker, because I definitely wouldn't say Travis Etienne deserved the contract he got from the Saints, because he got the exact same money contract as Kenneth Walker got, and I would not compare them on the same level. Kenneth Walker, I think, has proven way more that he is a star running back compared to Travis Etienne, but it's still a really good move for New Orleans, and now I think Saints fans can say they have their premier running back, so we'll just have to see how that all turns out. But that's kind of really those were really the big moves I want to talk about as far as big names that were heading into free agency that did get picked up. I did briefly mention Tyler Linderbaum too, who was basically the top, who is basically the top center going in. If you don't know what a center is, that is the person who is on the front lines keeping the quarterback protected. And, well, as we just talked about, the Raiders picked him up in free agency, and so now he's officially with the Raiders. The Raiders now have their star center to keep their rookie running back that in Fernando Mendoza protected when they draft him, and this is a solid move. I know people have been making jokes about the Ravens being mad that the Raiders took Linderbaum from them in free agency, and that's why they backed out of the trade with Crosby. That's just a joke. I don't think they really were that petty. Maybe. I don't know. Jeez, I mean, you still backed out of a big trade with Crosby for the Raiders and ruined Raiders draft plans, ruined all teams' free agency plans. So maybe they are salty like that. But still, it was a solid move. The Raiders got themselves a solid offensive lineman to keep that rookie protected. And like I said, the Raiders are seriously looking like they could be having a good season. But at the same time, we have all said, oh, the Raiders finally got it, and then they don't have it. So we'll have to see if they can finally back up all these moves that they've been doing. But we're going to now transition into, as I said earlier at the beginning of this episode, I want to talk about my top 3 winners and my top 3 losers from free agency. And how we're going to start this off is I want to just kind of give an honorable mention, because it's hard for me to say if this team has gotten better or if this team just does what a lot of teams tend to do in free agency, and that's just pay everybody, bring them over, and hope that they stick. And that honorable mention is going to go over to the New York Jets. They made a lot of moves. We did talk about the Jets a couple weeks ago with Aaron Glenn at the combine falling asleep. I love Aaron Glenn, actually. I really do. He was a really good defensive coordinator for the Lions, and I was surprised they would let him walk. But I hope that he could get everything figured out over there in New York to finally make this team competent. And, well, to start things off, he made a lot of moves. One of their first moves that was announced is that they had traded for Minkah Fitzpatrick from the Miami Dolphins, which is very interesting when you think about that, because the Dolphins and the Jets, they're in the same division. So either the Dolphins just felt like they had to get rid of some of that cap space, because we are going to talk about the Dolphins. They are in this list. Which list? You'll never know. But they had to get some cap space removed, and this might have been why they sent a trade out like this. They need to find someone that would be willing to go for a guy like Minkah Fitzpatrick and get some of that cap space down so they can make some sort of moves in free agency. But that was one of the first trades announced for the Jets where they got a star defensive player like that. And they made a lot of defensive moves, a lot of them. They went and got Joseph Osai, a edge rusher from the Bengals, which I almost wanted to put the Bengals in the losing list that I'll be getting into sooner or later, because, I mean, the Bengals, they lost Trey Hendrickson and they lost Joseph Osai. All they now have is that rookie they drafted last season, and I just don't know how that Bengals defense is going to look. I mean, once again, we keep talking about it, that the Bengals, they have a solid offense, but they have a terrible defense. And once again, this just feels like another season where Bengals are going to have a good offense that can win games, but they got to be constantly putting 40 points up just to keep up with another team, because their defense can't stop them. So that was one of the free agent signings that the Jets made. Another one they made was for Demario Davis from the New Orleans Saints, the team we were just talking about. He got picked up by the New York Jets here. And as you're going to see as I keep scrolling down, the Jets have made consistent moves for this defense. And I think that's a really good sign that you want to see from a team that's new head coach is supposed to be defensively minded, like Aaron Glenn. He's going in there and he's getting the defensive players. You even see one of our former Packers players, Kingsley Enabardi. I was kind of surprised that we got rid of him and let him go to free agency, but it is what it is, and I wish him the best. I hope he's able to do what he can over there in New York and be able to make this defense look competent. He got picked up. They picked up a safety, Nashawn Wright from the Bears. He got picked up. So you see a lot of cornerback, safety, defensive end, defensive tackle. defensive end, I mean, they made safeties. They've been making a lot of defensive moves. So they're spending that money for sure. And this could be a case of where spending the money actually ends up working for the team, or it could end up looking like it was just they spent all this money and now nothing clicks. But we'll have to see for sure. They did get a kicker, which that's good. They got themselves a fullback. They got themselves a tackle. There we got a linebacker. That's another defensive player. So they've been making those defensive moves. But the reason the Jets are in the honorable mention of moves is, well, they made a move for a quarterback. And that was none other than, that's right, Geno Smith, who was formerly with the Raiders.
I thought it was a really good move. I thought that they
masterful. Of course, be listening to them because they got their own opinions. I got mine. But the Jets, they traded with the Raiders to get Geno Smith. Now, it was first said that the Raiders had released Geno Smith. That was what was first reported, was that they released Geno Smith to go into free agency, and then they would see what team goes out there and gets him. But no, then it got reported that the Raiders actually worked out a deal with the Jets to send him over to New York, while the Raiders got a draft pick for it. But also there is some more details about that, is that the Raiders did end up paying some of the cap for Geno Smith to kind of sweeten the deal for the Jets to make a move to bring him back. I don't know how this will turn out. It's funny how this is a full circle moment, because Geno Smith, when he was drafted, as you can even see in this corner right here, he was drafted by the Jets back in 2013, where they picked him in round 2, pick 39. So this is a full circle moment where Geno Smith is going back to New York to be their star quarterback. I don't know how it's going to look. He was really bad over there in Las Vegas, really bad. Even though he started with the Jets, he looked bad. He went to the Seahawks. He had kind of a quarterback resurgence. We love talking about that, considering with Sam Darnold and where he started. He had a resurgence. He started to look like a solid quarterback. Then he got traded from the Seahawks to the Raiders. Everybody was excited. Then they started to see how bad he was. Raiders fans got mad. He proved he wasn't a good quarterback fit for them, and it fell apart. This could go either way for the Jets. This could go in the way of that this is just going to be their quarterback to help make them tank so they could maybe get a better draft pick in next year's draft. Or, who knows, maybe after growing up and aging, Geno Smith can bring something to the table that works better for the Jets, and they now have a better quarterback. Personally, I would say Geno Smith, I would say, can't guarantee it, but I think Geno Smith is going to be a better fit for the Jets compared to who they had this season, last season in Justin Fields. Justin Fields, I've really been a supporter of Justin Fields. I felt bad for him when he was in Chicago because it just felt like it wasn't a right fit. And I felt like he just needed to go to the right team. And when he went to the Steelers, he was looking like a solid pickup for them. He looked like he could have just maybe finally get that resurgence people felt like he deserved. Then he goes to the Jets. He did not look good. He struggled. And now the Jets are going for a quarterback that either is going to tank for them or he's going to make them be better. And I would kind of lean towards he's going to be a better fit for the Jets. So that's an honorable mention, is the New York Jets as far as a possible winner of this free agency this week for making the most moves, the most money moves. And we'll just have to see if this leads to anything. I think the Jets fans want to kind of suck so they can at least get better in the draft and get a better quarterback next year. But I think Jets fans would at least like to see some form of competent play from their defense, and they've definitely went out and gotten a lot of defensive players. So we'll have to see. But we're going to go and move on to one of our winners from week 1 of free agency, and that is the Rams. Yes, the Rams. I've talked about this team a few times in some of my episodes for a lot of their moves. First off, trading for Trent McDuffie from the Kansas City Chiefs, cornerback. And then they acquired Jalen Watson from the Kansas City Chiefs, another quarterback. People have been making the joke saying the Rams are turning into the Los Angeles Chiefs because they've been going out there getting players and stuff. And we'll have to definitely see for sure how this turns out. But like I've said, I consider this team a winner for this week because they've been addressing their problems. like I said in previous episodes when I did talk about Trent McDuffie being traded to the Rams, I said it. Everybody pointed out that the Rams secondary, their corners, were getting smoked by receivers. They couldn't keep up. They couldn't keep that coverage going. That's what resulted in that big touchdown from the Bears in that playoff game where the Rams are winning and they are after Caleb's scrambling around and stuff, and then just launches the ball up in the air, and then lo and behold, one of his tight ends is just completely open. And we all talked about it. We saw it. The footage shows, and and I'm even going to try to see here if I could pull up that footage that we saw it too. He got cooked by the tight end and ultimately resulted in the Bears being able to stay in the playoff game. He was able to stay in the playoff game here, and I'm going to go and play this video while I'm talking. And we see the Rams, they have the lead. All they have to do is sack Caleb Williams, and Kobe Durant, he gets cooked by Cole Kmet. And this just results in him being able to break away and get the touchdown to tie the game up and go into overtime. It was a bad look for the Rams, and so they're now bolstering this defense to get better cornerbacks, to be able to get that coverage, especially when you're in a division facing off against people like, George Kittle from the 49ers, or facing off against the recent Super Bowl winning champs Seahawks with Jackson Smith and Jigba, a receiver who is known for cooking cornerbacks. You need to start getting those better players so then that you can have somebody that be in coverage, make sure that they don't go and break out for some big yards or big gains or a touchdown, and just get better overall as a team. So they're making those moves here to make that defense better. Of course, they re-signed their safety Cam Curl, so that's once again helping that defense. They re-signed a tight end in Tyler Higbee, so that's good because the Rams, they are a team that typically run at least 3 tight ends on that offense, whether it's blocking, catching the ball. They are a very tight end heavy team, so it's good that they're bringing Tyler Higbee back. I actually did think that they were going to let him go into free agency and then maybe go for David Njoku from the Browns, who entered into free agency, but they didn't, so they clearly see something in Tyler Higbee to keep him around, and that's good. But another area we talked about with the Rams that was a very big problem was their special teams. We talked about it. It was very infamous, that game with the Seahawks in, if I'm correct, week 17, where the Rams had a kick that got brought back to the Seahawks, and the Seahawks ran the ball all the way back for a touchdown, and the Rams ended up losing that game because they couldn't on the special team side be able to prevent the Seahawks from returning a kick for a touchdown. And people talked about it. The Rams special teams just looked bad. It looked unprofessional. It just didn't look like a good special teams unit. And instantly after that game, they fired their special teams coordinator. So that was a big move. Well, they then picked up in free agency Joe Cardona, long snapper. This is why I'm putting the Rams here as a big winner of free agency. This team is making sure they go for the pieces they need to address the problems that were there last season. They're making those moves. The Rams are clearly, to me, they're showing they're in a win-now mode, especially when you have a quarterback that just won MVP last season. He's not getting any younger. I honestly think that after the season is done, he's going to retire in Matthew Stafford. And so the Rams, they are trying to be in this win-now mode because they know they need to jump on this opportunity to have a team that can win the Super Bowl. And considering how close they got to the Super Bowl, it makes sense that this team wants to jump onto this. So Rams are definitely one of my teams I had to say is a big winner. And they might even be a bigger winner if the rumors end up true, as I'm going to show you here. I've been talking about it for a few weeks now. The Rams, there's been a lot of rumors surrounding them after the announcement of the Colts of allowing Anthony Richardson, their former first-round pick, to seek trades. And I've said it. I feel that this would be a very solid fit. Get a guy like Richardson. Let him learn under Sean McVay. Let him develop, get better as a quarterback. And then now the Rams don't have to go into the draft and look for a quarterback there when you could get a guy that's going to be the same age as most of the quarterbacks heading into this year's draft. He's now developed. Stafford retires, and now you got yourself a young quarterback. Nothing is official yet, but as you can see from this person here, I'm just going to give a brief little breakdown. This guy is Ricky Scoops. I've became familiar with him because of last season. He was one of the first people who broke the news that Micah Parsons would be getting traded to my Packers. Ricky Scoops has been known as kind of a rumor leaker guy who has his sources. He's gone on top of things very well. Like I said, he talked about the Micah Parsons trade going down. He's someone that broke the news way before official reporters broke the news that talks for the Eagles trading A.J. Brown were going to completely fall flat and that they would no longer be wanting to trade him. And now he's going to be going back into hiding. As you could probably read here, he literally says one more thing before I sign off for a while. Anthony Richardson will be traded to the Rams to learn behind Matthew Stafford. And of course, people have been calling this account the fake Ricky Scoops, but he's been on top of things like crazy. And even as I was just saying earlier, he predicted that the Eagles were no longer going to be trading A.J. Brown. And even in this post, he says, keep calling me fake Ricky. A.J. Brown isn't moving. The Eagles think they have a roster to win a Super Bowl. Keep hating, though. He keeps getting this stuff down. He was the one who basically broke the news that, sure, there was an agreement in place for A.J. Brown to get traded to the Patriots during this offseason, but it fell through because apparently he doesn't want to play in the cold, and his preferred destination would have been Jacksonville or Los Angeles. So now he's going to still be an Eagle from what it sounds like. And we'll be talking about Ricky Scoops probably a few more times in this episode, but I had to at least talk about that. He's breaking the news that from what his sources are telling him, Anthony Richardson is going to become a Los Angeles Ram. So be listening to that, because when that news breaks, just remember that Ricky Scoops talked about it, and your boy over here just talked about it. I think if this ends up happening, I believe that this is a smart fit for the Rams. They now have a solid backup quarterback that can develop and become their new starter when the time comes. So, like I said, we'll have to see. But Rams could seriously become a big winner in free agency if this ends up going through. Our next big winner, this is a team that I think everybody has heard enough about because of everything that's been going on, and that is the Las Vegas Raiders. This team, I mean, I hate to admit it, they've had a good offseason so far. They have been making all the moves. They have the number one draft pick. I've said it before. They're going to go for the number one QB in this year's draft, and Fernando Mendoza. And they've been making sure to build around him. They went out, and as we were talking about, they went out for Tyler Linderbaum, the center from the Baltimore Ravens, to bolster that O-line, because that was something people talked about with the Raiders. That O-line was bad. It couldn't keep a quarterback protected for nothing. Now they got a center that can fix that for them and help, because center is supposed to be the leader of the O-line. They're the guy that's supposed to basically set the standard of how you're supposed to be protecting your quarterback. And so they get a guy as experienced as Linderbaum, who was seen as a top pick in this free agency. The Raiders are coming through on this. So we're going to be listing this off. I mean, they are going to be getting that number one quarterback in Fernando Mendoza. They're going to be getting Tyler Linderbaum. They got a new head coach in Clint Kubiak, who was just the offensive coordinator for the Seahawks, who just won the Super Bowl. And the offensive coordinator is the guy calling all those offensive plays. So he was a major point in why the Seahawks won that Super Bowl. So now they got a head coach like him who's experienced, who's going to be calling the offensive plays. And if the rumors are true with the Raiders that they're not going to start Fernando Mendoza and are actually going to get a veteran quarterback to play for them this season and be a bridge quarterback that helps Fernando develop, learn, and get better as the season goes on, the Raiders are setting themselves up to possibly be making it to the playoffs either this season or make it to the playoffs next season. I would not doubt it, 100%. Another move, they went and grabbed Nakobe Dean, linebacker from the Philadelphia Eagles. Nakobe Dean, I was surprised that the Eagles let him walk. He was a really solid linebacker on that Eagles defense that was part of that Super Bowl winning defense for the Eagles when they beat the Chiefs 2 years ago. And this is a solid pickup for the Raiders to bolster that defense. They are definitely going in on trying to make the offense better, but also make the defense better. And they turned around and grabbed a player from my team who was a teammate of Nakobe Dean's back in Georgia, and that was Quay Walker. They signed him to a 3-year deal to be a starting linebacker, and I think that's going to be a really dangerous 1-2 little punch they got going on there with those two players. So like I said, again, the Raiders, they're making some moves to get that defense on track. And then they also signed Malcolm Kuntz. They picked him up as a defensive end in free agency, so they're also building up at least some backup defensive ends for Max Crosby because, like I said, Crosby's back with the Raiders, so they now have their star defensive edge player back in the building with a backup and Kwity Paye from the Indianapolis Colts. Kwity Paye, I've seen on the internet a lot of Colts players have been praising him. They've been saying that he looks like a really solid defensive player. That pairing him up with Max Crosby of all people, it could end up looking like a really good 1-2 punch of those guys going after quarterbacks. And Raiders, I keep saying, Rams, I feel like, are like my number one winners of this free agency. The Raiders, I feel, is a very close second. They've been making the moves to try to fix this team to be ready to start competing either this year or by next year. They re-signed Eric Stokes, who had actually a really good season with the Raiders last year. Even though the Raiders were sucking, he was proven to be a really good cornerback. He was having a lot of pass breakups. He was providing solid coverage on receivers. So this was a smart move by the Raiders to bring him back for 3 years. Very good move to get that guy. Then they went out there and grabbed a receiver. They went out and for Jalen Naylor from the Minnesota Vikings. This was one of their receivers out there who a lot of people did say he was and from even the footage, I think there's even Viking fans that would say while you had Justin Jefferson and while you had Jordan Addison, Jalen Naylor was the obvious number 3 receiver. So we'll have to see how he looks if he can step into the role. I wouldn't say as a receiver 1. I think the Raiders are definitely going to have to either trade, pick up another receiver, maybe a Deebo Samuel who's still in free agency weirdly, maybe a Jawan Jennings. I don't know. We'll have to check that out for sure, but Raiders are definitely building up. They haven't released Trey Tucker either. That's someone that apparently, from what I've heard, the Raiders really like him as a receiver. So they got Trey Tucker. They got Jalen Naylor. They have Jack Betch, another person I've been seeing a lot of people feel he hasn't been used properly as a receiver by the Raiders and that he should have that talent to be a solid 2 or 1 receiver. And then Dante Thornton Jr. So there's a possible developmental receiver room that the Raiders got cooking. So I'm interested to see how this turns out for them. They ended up letting Daniel Carlson go, who was a kicker for them, which I'm surprised. And they went for Matt Gay, someone that was part of the 2021 Super Bowl winning Rams team. But people have said ever since that Super Bowl, he hasn't really been all that consistent as a kicker. So I'm surprised they would let Carlson go, but Matt Gay to come in. Maybe the price of the contract for Daniel Carlson, which is looking too high, so they felt they could get someone at a cheaper price. And they only did a 1-year deal. So when you have a 1-year deal, that's most likely meaning they want him to prove he deserves a contract extension. So we will definitely see how that turns out for them. And that's really all the moves that have happened with the Raiders. But like I said, they've made those moves to bolster that defense and try to bolster that O-line. So then Fernando Mendoza is going into a situation that benefits him. So Raiders are looking really good. They are. And now we're going to move on to my final winner of this free agency, and that is the Tennessee Titans. Yeah, this team here, I mean, they've made some moves too. We know that they already have their quarterback in Cam Ward. They already have their number 1 quarterback. They drafted him last season in the draft. And now they're doing the moves they need to do to bolster this team up so then Cam Ward can have people around him to make him better. They signed Wan'Dale Robinson from the Giants. That was being heavily rumored, so it was kind of the worst kept secret that the Titans would go out there and get Wan'Dale. They did it, and now they have a solid 2, maybe even number 1 receiver that Ward can throw that ball up to and trust that he's going to bring that ball back down. So that could be a really good move. When you have a head coach, like I said before, in Robert Saleh, he's defensively minded, and he's making those moves too to bolster that defense, to make the Titans become stronger. As they signed John Franklin Myers from the Broncos, they signed Alontae Taylor from the Saints, they signed Cordell Flott from the Giants as a corner. They signed a backup quarterback in Mitchell Trubisky, which is interesting because the Titans still have Will Levis on their team, who was someone they drafted, and he was a backup, and I've heard a lot of things that he's been a solid backup quarterback. So who knows? This could be leading to the Titans looking for a trade, maybe a team who's desperate enough to trade for a former high draft pick in Will Levis, and then Trubisky will be the for sure backup. So they got a backup corner, quarterback. They went for another corner, so once again bolstering that defense. They picked up a new center. They picked up a tight end. They're getting weapons for Cam Ward to throw to and weapons to protect him. As you even see, they picked up an offensive guard in Cordell Volson. They picked up Jordan Elliott from defensive tackle. We also did talk about there was that big trade that happened with the Titans and the Jets where they got Jermaine Johnson at edge, so that's another defensive player. They got Jacob Martin, the linebacker. They got Tommy Townsend, the punter, who, if I'm correct, he was formerly, I think at one point he was on the Texans. And he's been punters, they just got to be making sure that they could get that ball kick that ball to the opposite team and try their best to either ice them so then that team can't run it back, or if they have to run it back, they're all the way back, so it isn't too easy for them. So they picked up a decent enough punter, especially he was part of the Kansas City Chiefs when they were winning Super Bowls. So a good move for that. Special teams, they picked up a kicker in Joey Sly, who he's been around for a while too in the league. So good kicker as well. So they're bolstering a lot of the places that need help. And as you can even see as I'm scrolling down in this list, the Titans were definitely the biggest spenders. They spent for a lot of pieces on this offense and on their defense. So similar to what I said with the Jets, this is really going to turn into was this a good move for the Titans to spend all this money, or does it end up not working for them? And also, too, I wanted to go back on Wan'Dale because he was with the Giants, and with the Giants, the Titans now have the former head coach of the Giants that was working with Wan'Dale Robinson and Brian Daboll, who is the offensive coordinator. So he has that connection with this wide receiver. So he's going to make those plays. So Cam Ward could be launching that ball to Robinson. So it's a good pickup for the Titans, and they would definitely would have to be my last team as a winner of this free agency, 100%. And next what we're going to move into here is, before we get into our losers, I do want to talk about there was breaking news on March 13th, Friday, that the Titans were releasing L'Jarius Sneed, who is a cornerback that formerly played with the Super Bowl winning Kansas City Chiefs when they were going on their big streak and run. The Titans are releasing him, so he's going to be a free agent. There's definitely going to be teams interested in picking him up for their defense. Some people think maybe the Chiefs might bring him back for another run. There's been a lot of people thinking the Rams might go for him. This is why I was saying earlier, people are starting to joke that the Rams are becoming the Los Angeles Chiefs, that they might go and pick up L'Jarius Sneed for another cornerback position. There's even been posts on Instagram from, let me see here if I could find it. Trent McDuffie, the cornerback that the Rams traded Chiefs for, he's been heavily talking about a lot, and even people posted on his Instagram. Let me see here. He's been talking on his Instagram where it looks like he could be actually trying to recruit Snead to join the Rams. Let me see here. If I can find it, it was a latest. Let's see here. Can I find? So yeah, here we go. This is the Instagram story. As you can see, this was from Trent McDuffie, where he made a Instagram story where you see him, Jalen Watson, and L'Jarius Sneed there after they won the Super Bowl with the Chiefs. He tagged him. He's trying to recruit him. He's clearly trying to recruit Snead to come over to Los Angeles so then they can have a cornerback room, as this post even says here. A cornerback room that would consist of L'Jarius Sneed, Trent McDuffie, Jalen Watson, and Emmanuel Forbes Jr., and that's a major improvement that is definitely a major improvement of a cornerback room compared to what the Rams had before. No offense to Kobe Durant. He was a good, solid corner, but these guys definitely bring a little bit more of that eye candy when you see their name. So we'll have to see if maybe Snead does become a Rams in the coming week. But now we got to talk about dishonorable mention for my losers of the free agency. These are teams I felt didn't make a lot of moves. They've been kind of quiet so far. And I just want to also say, too, when I talk about these teams, it's not that I'm saying that, oh, this is it, they're bad, they're going to go into the next season being bad. Definitely not. Moves don't entirely count for a team. But there can be reason to either get excited or be concerned that your team is not making the proper moves to get their team better compared to how they were before. And my dishonorable mention, because this was a team that was in the playoffs, so it's hard for me to just go and say, oh, they're going to be bad next season and everything just because they haven't made moves, but we don't know. And that's the Broncos. They're a dishonorable mention because I can't say that they're one of the biggest losers, but they've been extremely quiet. Extremely quiet. As far as we've known, the most of Broncos have really been doing in their free agency has been re-signing people. They re-signed their running back, J.K. Dobbins, to a 2-year deal, which, good move. That's a really good move for the Broncos. They did come, at least they're getting that running back that didn't get to play the full season, but when he was playing, he was good. So it's good to get that 1-2 punch with your rookie and J.K. Dobbins. So you got R.J. Harvey and J.K. Dobbins grabbing that ball, going out there, running it. I think it's a solid move for the Broncos. They needed to bring him back. I think he didn't get a full season to show what he can offer. And I think that maybe, who knows, the Broncos could have looked a lot better if J.K. Dobbins was in that backfield. We really just don't know because he was out with an injury. So good thing that they brought him back. It's a good move. Alex Singleton, they re-signed him. That's another player on their defense they brought back. So at least they got one of their star linebackers. And as you're going to be seeing as we look through this, a lot of their moves consisted of re-signing. That's why I had to put them as a dishonorable mention, because while it is good to bring back some of your star players, if you can't go out there and make moves for some of these top free agents that are available and try to help fix some of the issues of your team, like, for example, I mean, maybe should have been trying to look for a backup quarterback. Maybe see if there was any receivers available, because it was a very not well-kept secret that the receivers the Broncos currently have don't really bring a lot of that stability. I mean, you have Cortland Sutton. He is a good receiver, but that's just one. Troy Franklin has been inconsistent. Marvin Mims has been inconsistent. Even one of the rookies that they had, he was inconsistent. So you would have thought maybe they could have tried to go out there for a receiver that had a little bit more talent. So like I said, the more we scroll down, it is a lot of re-signs. So they at least are bringing back pieces, but they're not gaining any new pieces. And on top of that, they lost Dre Greenlaw, who was one of their defensive players who was really good, actually. And I was surprised that they let him walk into free agency. And the worst part is that now he's returning back to the 49ers. So Broncos now just let Dre Greenlaw go back to the team he originated from, and they probably are going to have to play against him this coming season. So depending on how it turns out, he could have some beef with the Broncos, and he might have a crazy good game when he plays against them in this upcoming season. So we'll have to just see. But like I said, that's why they did this honorable mention. They lost, in my opinion, more than they gained, and they stayed at this point the exact same. So maybe the Broncos just feel like they don't have to make the moves because maybe they just feel that their team was so good enough to make it to the playoffs that they don't have to change all too much. But we'll have to see if that theory is correct. Now we are going to get into the losers of this free agency. And first of them, I know some people might feel like I'm doing this because I'm a Packers fan. I'm not. This is seriously just me paying attention and watching as free agency, and that is the Bears. Listen, I might not like the Bears. I might not like Chicago. But I love the game of football, and I pay attention to stuff when it comes to this. The Bears, in my opinion, I already have a bold prediction for the Bears. I think the Bears this season are going to be the Commanders of last season, where they had a really good season under their new head coach. Everything looked like it was clicking, and I think they're going to kind of fall off. Does that mean the team is worse? No, I don't think the Bears could get as bad as the Commanders looked this last season. I don't think so. But just because a team might get better doesn't mean that a team can't have a worse record. And a worse record meaning you don't make it to the playoffs. And I honestly, my bold prediction is I don't think the Bears are going to make it to the playoffs. I think that other teams in their division have gotten better. I think that it's going to get harder. And especially my biggest problem, and sadly on this thing, I want to see actually, because while the Bears have re-signed some people, they've lost. Let me see. I'm going to see if I can try to I want to see if I could get a little bit of the list here. Let's see. Yeah, so here we go. Well, it's not the full list, but it is still a list. The Bears, they, like I said with the Broncos, the Bears went into free agency and they ended up losing. They ended up losing more players than they gained. And when you lose more players than you gain, I feel like you're getting worse as a team, especially when the Bears was a team that their defense wasn't really all that. And I'm not just saying that as a rival or opposing team or anything. I'm saying this as everybody knew it. The Bears defense wasn't all that good. They were a defense that heavily thrived on turnovers. They thrived on interceptions. And people noticed that when that team couldn't get interceptions, their defense didn't look good. And so the fact that they've lost Tremaine Edmonds, they've lost. Here we go. This should be the best I could get here. The Bears lost two safeties in Kevin Byard III, safety Jaquan Brisker. They lost a cornerback in C.J. Gardner-Johnson. They lost a cornerback in Nashawn Wright. They lost another safety in Jonathan Owens. They lost a defensive end in Dominique Robinson. And they lost two offensive players with Amalide Zaccheaus and their other wide receiver, Devin Duvernay. So they've lost two receivers. They also lost DJ Moore to the Bills, who traded for him. So not only have the Bears lost offensive pieces for Caleb Williams to throw to, they've lost a humongous chunk of their defense that was a huge part of that team getting turnovers. And if you were a team that everybody knew defensively didn't look good unless they got turnovers. It's not a good look that you let a lot of the people who caused most of those turnovers to go into free agency to other teams. It's just not a good look. And seeing this, I feel this adds more fuel to my fire that I don't think the Bears are going to look as good as they looked this season. I think that they'll still be pretty solid offensively since they still have DeAndre Swift. They still have Cole Kmet, their tight end. They still have they still have Luther Burden III, their receiver. They still have they still have Roma Dunze. They still have that rookie tight end that they drafted. They still have those offensive pieces, but now it's going to be a lot harder for that defense to cause turnovers for the offense to be able to thrive and get points from the defense causing a turnover. So, and as we did even say, their linebacker Tremaine Edmonds got released too, and he got picked up from the Bills. So it's just not a real good, just not a good look for the Bears there. And that's why they're on this list of being some of my top losers of the free agency, because they lost way more players than they really went out there and gained. So we'll have to see. Maybe, who knows? I could get proven wrong. The Bears end up going to the playoffs again, and who knows? Maybe they even make it to the Super Bowl. Don't see it happening, but anything's possible. My next big loser of the free agency is the Miami Dolphins. And I don't have to even say who really all got released. I mean, we talked about Minkah Fitzpatrick getting traded to the Jets from them. And before I do say about why they're one of my biggest losers from this free agency, I do have to at least say they did go and get themselves a quarterback after losing their starter in Tua. They went out and grabbed a backup quarterback from my team in Malik Willis, who everybody says they think is the closest quarterback that could have a resurgence, even though it might be a little harder considering that the Dolphins don't have too many pieces on that offense to get the ball to from Malik. We'll have to see. But the reason the Dolphins are my biggest loser is because of the quarterback they lost. Well, more so the quarterback they had to let go. And you probably already can see some of the money that's here as I pulled this up, but I'm going to break it down for you real quick. The Dolphins, it was known they were looking for a trade partner. They were hoping they could have tried to trade Tua to another team, because if they release him, you are reading this right, and even on New York Times here, because the Dolphins had to release Tua, they eat negative cap space. So that means that's a lot of money that's now going down the drain towards Tua for the contract extension they paid him a couple years back. Yes, that's right. They have to eat $99.2 million in dead cap space. That is why the Dolphins are a big loser. It's not because they lost a whole bunch of players or they didn't sign anybody. It's because they couldn't sign anybody. To have that kind of negative cap space, you can't really get anybody in free agency. And that's why they're a big loser, because now the Dolphins barely have any cap space to work with. This is pretty much on the par with what the Denver Broncos had to deal with when they decided to let Russell Wilson walk. They had to eat a whole bunch of dead cap money space. And we saw how long it took for the Broncos to finally become relevant again as far as getting back to the playoffs with Sean Payton. So the Dolphins, they're going to be sitting here having to worry about never making those big moves in free agency or trades to make contracts, because now they're sitting here with $99.2 million just sitting in dead money because they couldn't find anybody to trade for Tua. And then to add more salt to the injury, Tua ended up getting picked up by as you can see by the jersey here, he got picked up by the Falcons. Yeah, the Atlanta Falcons officially signed Tua to their team. So now he's going to be competing for that starting job with Michael Penix Jr. So now it's like the Dolphins, the Dolphins just watched their quarterback, who they drafted in the first round, go to another team, and they got no kind of compensation for him. All they got was just money that they can't spend. So that's why they're on this list. I know this is a short one, but I just had to mention the Dolphins as a big loser because I don't know how you could be a winner if you're walking into free agency with no money to be able to spend and make your team better. That's what that money is for, going into free agency and trying to make your team better than how it started. And the Dolphins are, at this point, I fear they're going to get worse. So that's why they're a loser on this list. And now we're going to move on to my last and final loser of this free agency, and that is the Ravens. Yep. Come on now. After everything that went down with Max Crosby, I had to include them on this list as a big loser because not just because of the Max Crosby thing that went down, but because the Ravens, they did one of the things that I've been considering a lot of losers in free agency, and that is they lost more than they gained. Sure, they got Trey Hendrickson, who is a good edge rusher, but Max Crosby, he's turning 29. Trey Hendrickson, he's 32 and suffered an injury that kept him out of the season last year. So the Ravens took a guy that also is injury prone and is older. And typically the 30s is seen as the as the young kids say nowadays, you're now an unk in the NFL once you hit the 30s. That's where people start to see that your talent doesn't look as good as it might have looked before when you were younger. And so while sure they got Trey Hendrickson, they got a guy who's older than the previous guy they traded for. So they gained someone, but they lost a lot of people. They lost Linderbaum to the Raiders, as we said. Let's see. Ravens. And their list of players that they all ended up losing in free agency, that list is long. Look at that. I think that's even longer than the list that the Bears lost of players. They lost their center. They lost two, not one, but two tight ends. One to the Giants and Isaiah Likely. One to the Chargers and Charlie Kolar. They lost a defensive player, safety, in Alohi Gilman to the Chiefs. They lost a fullback. A fullback is not a running back. Typically, a fullback is more of a bigger-bodied running back. This is typically the guy that on some plays, the team will hand the ball off to him, and he's able to get a solid amount of yards, but could take more hits sometimes. So they lost a fullback. They lost a punter for special teams. They lost another defensive player in Ardarius Washington, defensive back, who signed with the Giants. Jordan Stout went with the Giants. Patrick Ricard went to the Giants. You're seeing kind of a trend here. That's 4 Ravens players that went to the Giants. And you want to know why? Because the Giants have John Harbaugh, the former head coach of the Ravens, who is now the new head coach of the Giants. So a lot of these teams are going to reunite with their former head coach, leaving the Ravens with less players. And another person they lost a defensive edge in Draymond Jones, who went to the Patriots. So a team that just went to the Super Bowl now just got themselves a defensive piece to add. And now they've also lost a running back in Keaton Mitchell. Now, we don't know what team is going to go out there for him, considering that he was a backup. He wasn't Derrick Henry. He wasn't the starter. But still, to lose a backup running back, now you're going to have to go into free agency or the draft and maybe try to look for a backup running back to replace Keaton Mitchell. And that's another theory. That's what some people feel like maybe that's why the Ravens decided to get cold feet on losing the 2 first-round draft picks, because they saw how many players they lost and they know they need to keep those draft picks to go out there and sign other players. So I can understand the business aspect why they did it. Still doesn't mean it didn't make it any less shady what they did to the Raiders, but still, you see it. They lost more players than they gained, which I think is a big no-no when going into free agency. If you're losing more players than you're getting, that just leaves this kind of taste in your mouth of how can they get better if all they're doing is losing players. So that's my final loser of free agency from this week. This is only week 1. We could still see more signings happen, but typically the first week of free agency is when it is at its most highest peak. This is where you're going to see most of the players be getting signed, getting traded. So it's going to die down, but anything can happen in these next couple days. Who knows? Maybe even when I end this, we could find out, like I said earlier, Anthony Richardson getting traded to the Rams. Anything is possible in these next couple days now that free agency is officially open. But I'm getting excited. It's like it just feels like we're getting closer and closer to when NFL is back on, and it's going to be fun to be watching these games again just to see where these teams end up as the days go by, as the months go by, and to see who ends up in that Super Bowl. But once again, that's going to be it for today's episode. I want to thank everybody for tuning in, and I hope that everybody has a great day.